Campbell, you are here for the 5th episode of Voices for Wellness. This has been working out really well. I'm enjoying it very much and getting the opportunity to have conversations, talk to different whole health and wellness practitioners about their tips and tricks and the stories that they've lived through and all of the different things that have happened in their life that have gotten them exactly where they are today to share some information with you. Thank you all so much for being here. And James Hunter, thank you so much for being a part of this, and welcome. Please tell us about yourself.
Thank you for having me here. So briefly about myself, for those who may know me on my Facebook friends list, and some of the people we know in common, I've been a licensed professional counselor for more than 20 years in the state of Texas. And I'm also what's referred to as a licensed chemical dependency counselor in the state of Texas. The populations I've worked with in mental health are individuals with anxiety, depression, sometimes referred to as mood disorders, adjustment to life issues, things of that nature. And I've also worked with individuals with substance use disorders, addiction type of situations, and sometimes you may have a co-occurrence situation. So that's pretty much what I've been doing in that industry for more than 20 years. And I can get more as how it's relevant later in the video. But I've also, what I find to be a very effective combination for what I've been doing with my life professionally is that some already who know me know I'm a certified personal trainer. I'm certified with the National Strength and Conditioning Association, and I have been involved with promoting and incorporating a lifestyle that involves a physical exercise, focus on nutrition, what we put in our bodies, is part of people's holistic approach to all of our health and not just one variable, which we'll get into that more. So I've been a personal trainer in some capacity for more than 20 years too. And I've gotten feedback from a lot of individuals years ago, long before the pandemic, which we're going to talk about, as to how they really appreciated that. And they in a lot of people's words, they found out to be a very complementary combination, which I agree, because a lot of times it's not a simple as an issue of education and showing people how to do things. A lot of times it's an issue of a discussion of changing a lifestyle, values, priorities, and things like that. So the combination of all that for wellness, it's just an awesome combination. Obviously, it's a bit of bias, but there's truth because that's what I do. So that's in a nutshell. There's a lot more that I can elaborate on.
That's the thing here is this whole health, this idea that we have to do it all, and the mind, body, and the spirit are all included in that. So one of the things I really like to ask everyone is, I want a little bit about your history and how did you end up where you are in your career and leading wellness? Where did it start for you?
That's an excellent question. And I view it, when I think of when it began, really, it was a process developmentally. And I kind of put some notes up here because I think it'll help illustrate my experience. And this may be true of other people. So with wellness, mind, body, spirit, then we think of a lot of things that are tied into our mental and physical health. I'll get more into that. But for me, at the age of 12 years old, I began with one of the components when you think about wellness. Some people who don't have a comprehensive understanding, depending on that, what is the definition of a wellness? For some people, they just may think of people who eat healthy and work out, right? They may not realize it's those other issues. So for me, I essentially had what was a drive and motivation for exercise. For me was self-care. It was not necessarily self-care at the beginning. It was more, you can think of it superficial or practical. I started playing sports. I was 12 years old in the 7th grade. I realized I was a skinny guy, but I could run pretty fast. So I was like, if I don't want to get hurt playing football, I need to do something about that situation. You call that productive anxiety, right? I don't want to feel pain when I run into the big guy. So I started strength training between 12, had weights in my garage. I had buckets that I'd fill up with lead weights and do curls. And then of course the school had weights. So the point of this is that my initial, this was basically stages of my value system. So value is what we assign worth to and what that means to us. For me, part of my wellness, what began then is that I saw a value in that, what working out could do for me physically. But it started becoming more, it was practical for sports, but it started to turn into other things that became meaningful as I got older. And those were like health, longevity, self-care, that were not just about the present, but also being forward thinking of my future. Energy, mood, my cognition, memory, thinking better, being more efficient, on my toes. I love feeling good. And I started realizing that ostensibly or primarily I was working out for sports, but then all these other things that were extra benefits, I took note of that. And to me, I thought that was awesome. It's like, I always say that being fit is like a superpower because you feel good compared to the general population. So these other issues, it boosted all aspects of my life. So when I was done playing sports in high school, some people say, I can't wait to graduate. I don't have to work out no more. For me, it was the opposite. I had a love for it. I just wanted to dive right into it and keep doing it my whole life. And I went to graduate school and started doing my education, and I worked in different industries. So really, in terms of wellness, mind, body, spirit, really in my 30s, it became more salient to have a comprehensive approach to where it wasn't just, hey, look at how good a shape I'm in, some of the superficial things. I want to look good to people of opposite sex or whoever you're interested in, or, you know, you just feel good about yourself. Let's be honest. There's some, you know, things like that. I feel more confident because of, you know, being in shape and so on. So those are kind of like young people type of situations. We feel like we're going to live forever. We're invincible. But in my 30s, I started realizing that, hey, this life, you know, it's a lifespan. It doesn't go on forever. So I started thinking about the quality of my life. And regardless of how long I live, some people are fatalistic, or everybody's gonna die someday. And that's true. Whether I make it to the average of 77, or if I make it 85, 90, whatever that number is, there's something to be said about quantitative measurements, but there's more to be said about qualitative measurements. I wanna have the fullest life for as long as possible. So for me, to answer your question, it began in part as 12 years old for practical if you want to say superficial, we can call it that, and then evolved as I matured into my 30s. I stopped smoking cigarettes in my 30s, and I don't judge people from a moral standpoint. Oh, you're smoking cigarettes. I smoked periodically for a period of at least 20 years. I used to work in the bar business and had some other habits where I picked up habits like that socially, how that ties in. So I finally, as part of my approach of practicing wellness, I was like, you know, I'm a personal trainer, I'm a counselor, I'm supposed to be a rational role model. Well, how can I fully do that if I'm smoking a cigarette somewhere? So to me, that was part of my motivation to stop quitting, but also respect for myself. And some people, I understand that that's an issue as when they're ready to change that behavior, and it's a process. So if anyone out there has that habit, it's not a knock at you. I used to smoke myself, and it's definitely something that can be changed. And modifiable risk factors, I'll touch on that. So my journey was a process, to answer your question, the comprehensive approach. I definitely do things now. I'm 49, but I started thinking, my way of thinking, the cognitive part, how I internalize myself and how I think about myself in relationship to people, places, and things, manage stress, taking time out to take care of my body, but my mental health, meditation, sleeping good. So wellness, it went from, you know, just the physical part to so much more because I, you know, evolved or progressed with it. So this concept of wellness, it's dynamic, it's flexible, and it can grow and become stronger over time by working on, you can do small changes over time, but they add up to big changes. And that's what happened to me. I made small changes, but where I'm at now, and I'll be 50 in 7.5 months, I don't feel 50 years old. And I feel qualitatively with my life, it's like a superpower. I can, you know, that's what I call it with my friends, like, man, we're getting older, but we're taking care of ourselves. We're reaping the benefits. And so I try to get people excited for that. And it's never too late to start laying that foundation. You can start anywhere in your life and start deriving some benefits. So I'll pause there so you can.
No, I completely agree. And I love that you brought up the subject of quality of life, qualitative life, because I think, you know, my big passion wellness thing that I dive into, of course, is food and exercise and in the garden and all of that kind of stuff. But for me, it really was about quality of life. And a lot of times people will kind of say, well, I want to eat bacon until I'm, you know, 80 years old. And I'm like, okay, well, I want to eat bacon until I'm 80 years old too, but I want to eat the highest quality of bacon that I can eat until I'm 80 years old. And I want to feel really good at 80 still, you know, like I don't want to just be eating bacon and having heartburn and vomiting and all of the things that come along with the, you know, I want to feel good. And so I think the quality of life, and I've had a lot of family members that have passed from cancer and heart disease and things like that. And when it came down to it, the quality of life that they were living toward the end of that really made me look again at what I wanted from wellness in my life. So I love that. I love when that subject gets brought up. I think it's very important. So yeah, okay, good. That's great. That's a perfect start for us. And then the next thing I like to ask people is give us 3 specific tips or tricks that you would encourage somebody to get themselves started, to move that way.
So 3 specific tips or things that I would recommend, and there's a lot. I kind of jotted a few up here, but from the concept of wellness, you want to set yourself up for success, okay? So if somebody is thinking, okay, I want to start feeling better, I'm going to start exercising, and I know I need to change some eating habits, I would recommend picking just a few things a month or quarter, however you want to look at their time, to change some things. So with your nutrition, start focusing on minimizing sugar. Pick that one thing and try to accomplish that first. Get that under control. And then the next step, okay, now, you know what? I need to talk to my nutritionist or registered dietitian or someone who's competent in that area. And let me look at my estimated energy requirements for calories and the macros for my needs. What does that picture look like? What does that need to be? Start becoming educated. If you try to get all these variables on the table, everything you need to do at once, it can be a bit overwhelming if you try to do them all at once. So thinking of it as something that's going to become a part of you and integrated into who you are, not as a chore, but rather this is going to be a shift in your values. So pick one thing at a time, master that, and then work on another thing. I'm going to speak about the working out part here in a second, but the working out part will not be as beneficial if we don't have certain things in place. Sleep, I wrote sleep up here, you probably can't see it. So sleep is so huge, sleep and recovery. The lack of sleep is a modifiable, it can be a modifiable risk factor. And lack of sleep, it can affect your ability to concentrate. It can contribute to mood disturbances like anxiety, depression. Your working memory is a form of intellect, how you can deal with problems and hold information and when you're discussing things, that can be affected. We're going to talk about the pandemic a little bit. Sleep, lack of sleep, sleep deprivation. I've been at the National Institute for Sleep Studies. I did a thing on it on my timeline a while back. So it is a fact. They've done studies that it suppresses your immune system. So if you're not getting the quality of sleep, you have a suppressed immune system, which is going to make you more vulnerable to stress. So I would suggest trying to get sleep regulated, do things that can help that situation. With working out, specific to exercise, you want to follow some concepts of specificity, which is basically what are you trying to accomplish in terms of what your goal is. Some people might be trying to lose weight. Some people might be trying to get stronger. It may be individual. So you want to talk with a personal trainer, somebody who's qualified to help design a program that is representative of your needs, because a cookie cutter program or something generic may not help you get there as efficiently. And sometimes you might get hurt doing something that's not relevant. Communicate any special needs you have with the trainer. If you have any orthopedic issues, any things that need to be considered as far as your program. The progression of working out, here's something I got to point out that unfortunately I see this happen more times than I think it should happen, is you have somebody who's never worked out. They've been sedentary and they may have some anxiety. They maybe have a little scared about their body image. They don't know anything at all. And they're deconditioned rather. Their body's been doing nothing. Maybe they sit in an office chair. So they go to work out somewhere, maybe it's in a group setting, or maybe it's in a type of a program that's more intermediate to advanced. And the trainer may not know this person hasn't been doing anything. So what happens is they have them do high level advanced movements that are beyond their conditioning for what they're prepared for. They don't have the foundation for it. So they get trained way too hard, too quickly. And so what happens? They can't move for a week. They're discouraged and now they don't want to go back. So I would encourage other personal trainers who know this, and for clients to be an educated and informed consumer. Ask your personal trainer, what experience do you have working with someone who's had gastric bypass surgery, who's never lifted weights, and they've lost all this weight? Do you have any experience working with someone who has metabolic issues, diabetes type 2, different types of situations? Have you ever worked with anybody who has lower back problems, right? As far as what kind of accommodations you can do with the situation. So what happens is there's a greater chance of them getting hurt and doing too much too fast. So point is, you got to start slow. You want to do basic fundamental movements, your multi-joint type movements, where you're going to focus on your hips, legs, your major muscle groups. Essentially, that could be a different video, but you want to start with basic movements, maybe just 2 to 3 times a week, a split routine. You got to have sufficient recovery between those workouts, at least 48, 72 hours. That way your body has a chance to make what's called neuromuscular adaptations. And over time, in a few weeks alone, you're going to notice some improvement. You go through a period of working out, the body goes under a stress when you train it, but then it recovers. So that is a process. You got to give it a chance of progression. Only as you get a little bit better condition, then you do a little bit more, and then a little bit more. It's in steps. You get the idea. So that is a tip for if you're going to start working out and you need guidance. Make sure you're not doing too much too fast, but you will get to a level where, yeah, you will be needs. Your program can be a lot of different things, but you want it to be representative of you, for it to be meaningful for you, for what you're trying to accomplish. And it doesn't have to be complicated. You don't got to work out 5-6 days a week. Everybody's different. 2 to 3 days a week of productive strength training, an effective routine, some cardio, eat reasonable. You'd be surprised. That make a world of difference just for the physical health, but then it's going to help the mental health because you're going to tolerate stress better. And of course, sleep. If you don't sleep, all this other stuff's not going to work as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I actually loved when I do my garden consultations, one of the first things I teach people is we're going to take really small bites, and we're not going to do a turnkey situation. So there's no cookie cutter here, because you'll give up and you'll be mad at yourself. And, and so I completely understand that, taking small steps and moving in that direction. And I also love the idea of the spectrum concept, which just says, you're not going to do exactly what I do because I've been on a different spectrum. I've been doing things in a different pathway. And so everyone out there needs to understand where they are. And if they're talking to professionals about where they are so that they can get the help that they need, be very honest with your professional about where you are on whatever spectrum we're talking about. And so then that way, that when you take those big bites off, we can say, oh, let's back off a little bit, because maybe that bite was a little more than you can swallow right now. Yeah, that kind of thing. So I like that very much. And I think that that it's very wise. And I do think people get very overwhelmed with the concept of, working out and doing, following a routine and, things like that. And I definitely know, just even from my own experience with certain types of exercise groups and things like that, that you can move forward a little too fast, and then you do feel pain. And then once you feel the pain, then you back off a little bit, but then you start to go like, I don't know if I want to go back again. And it's the same thing in the garden. You get a little bit of failure. You feel like you've had a little bit of failure, and then you want to quit, So yeah.
You bring up a good point about sometimes you may experience some soreness, which is to be expected to a degree and is normal. That's the body essentially going through recovery. That actually gets a lot better over time, and you'll get to what a lot of people refer to as, I have the good soreness. Like you felt like you did something, it feels good, and then you recover rather quickly, and you're still able to go work in the garden or whatever you need to do. You're not like, can't function because of the workout. If you ever have a workout where you can't function afterwards, there's something wrong with that. That don't need to happen. Now, I want to point out something real quick, like, for the ladies out there about the tip and that sometimes the fear and the concern. If I had a nickel for every time a lady or communicated to me, well, James, I don't want to get as big as a man, right? Because that happens because they see some of the extreme examples of some women that are very impressive. That's a whole nother conversation. So what happens is they think that's going to happen to them just after a week of working out with just, minimal stuff trying to get started. So what I say, don't worry, you can work out as hard as you can. That's not going to happen because of the hormonal differences between men and women. But here's the good thing is that quantitatively there's differences between men and women in how we respond to strength training. because like I mentioned, the hormonal difference, some physiological differences. However, the qualitative benefits are the same for both. Women can expect an increase in lean muscle, which is good, a protective factor. They can expect to have a strengthened system, that core, like the people talk about it, but really it's a system of your legs, your hips, those lower back muscles, being able to perform movements effectively with good form and not get hurt. They can derive all those benefits and the other things that are known, like osteopenia, osteoporosis. Strength training helps as a protective factor to help promote more bone mineral density. So that's true for men and women. So the benefits qualitatively are the same. The magnitude to which the muscle is going to be expressed is going to be different. So women can rest assured you're going to be the best possible version of who you can be, look healthy and fit, but you're not going to get super big. And there's usually other things going on in those situations I don't need to necessarily get into in this video. But I want to say that because unfortunately that can scare a lot of women from wanting to work out. They think they're going to turn into the very extreme, unrepresentative end, to be quite honest, of what actually happens in nature. So.
Yeah, you know, before 40, interestingly enough, my body built muscle really fast, like I did when I was an athlete, when I was a kid, and I did have bulky muscles. But then as the hormones shifted in my body, now it's actually kind of hard to build muscle. And so I can see that shift, even just that alone, that shift alone has been different in my body. Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned the pandemic a few times. Tell us a little bit about any shifts that you have seen in your own personal, all of your stuff that you do with the pandemic.
Sure. So professionally, the interesting thing is that these concepts about wellness, if the DSM-5 is a diagnostic statistical manual of mental health disorders, it also has substance use disorders. And what you'll find when it speaks about these diagnoses or disorders is that they are usually a cluster of cognitive patterns of thinking. Sometimes those are healthy or not maladaptive. A cluster of cognitive, behavioral, and physiological symptoms. So it's not just one variable. Again, it's kind of a spectrum of different things going on. So because of that, we understand that if you're going to try to help people get well, it's not enough just to give them a pill, right? It's not enough just to, for some people, hey, let's just have a conversation and for me to help you have a healthier thinking skills. Well, that's not going to matter too much if they're not sleeping and they have malnutrition, they're not eating properly, right? You need them all. You need them all. So this really, to answer your question, is that it's been around. If you look at the SAMHSA website, they have a diagram thing you can look at, and it has 8 dimensions of wellness, meaning that our health is more than just a few things. You know, really, the pandemic has affected, to an extent, social connection. That's gotten a lot better. A lot of it because of technology, people getting out more and being creative. You think of spiritual, people need to nurture that still. Emotional, that was affected, no doubt. We can talk about the anxiety part, no doubt. Occupational, sense of purpose. You think that wasn't impacted for a lot of people? So these are all part of our wellness, these other dimensions. So it's been understood that this is important. So particular to the the pandemic, COVID-19, the virus, we had to shut down, and then you had different narratives back and forth, and then you kind of seen like a progression of, okay, here we are now with the conversation about it, if you will. So with the pandemic in my industry, I would say yes. I think there's a local community health center. It's a nonprofit place, and they're on social media, and they had a training and for people who wanted to go to it. That was, guess what? Wellness and how to boost your immune system, right? So we are seeing some positive conversations. What can people do to be proactive? I know as a mental health counselor and other professionals, these are things that if you go to trainings, they do promote it. So I would say it's been there, but now it's more salient, more so than ever. And I want to throw this in real quick. So with the pandemic, anxiety, it was very high. And in my other video I've done in the past, you might have seen on my timeline, is that anxiety typically has a purpose. It tells us something's wrong. We need anxiety to an extent. It's the disproportionate, out of control that can be a problem. So with fear, if something immediately is trying to get us, like a danger or a threat, we get fight or flight. I either need to get away from it, or I'm going to have to take it on because I have no choice to survive. And it can be very frightening. There's other issues going on. Anxiety is about things that are either can be ambiguous. We don't know how far away it is. Is the virus here now? Is it going to be here in December? right? It's ambiguous, or it's distant or down the road. Because of that, it's kind of looming. So people can't necessarily outrun COVID-19. I can't outrun a global pandemic. I'm on planet Earth. I can't get away. So that can be very, well, what do I do now? My other choice is I'm going to have to get a plan of action and confront the situation. Motivated into a plan of action to do something about it. So initially on social media, and then sometimes from healthcare professionals, it depended on what their narrative was. And I'm not trying to cause a stir, but my observation is that when anyone who would state evidence-based facts about modifiable risk factors, things we can change and have control over that will improve our prognosis because we are building a foundation to be as healthy as possible. So in the event we do get infected with a virus, doesn't mean we can't be infected, but it sure helps our prognosis to either survive it, or hopefully maybe we won't get symptomatic. So that is a fact, and there's nothing wrong with being able to have that conversation. My perception is that people interpreted initially that any conversation or attempt to say, hey, everybody, now's a good time to really, you might want to think about taking better care of yourself, because look, see here, what's happening, what are you going to do now? So they, in my opinion, interpreted that on how they processed it was, oh, that's undermining the message of precaution, 6 feet away distance, social distance, the mask, and those things definitely have their place. So the balance is this, and I'm glad to see that there's it's meeting together to where it's okay to talk about it, and we can still say, yes, we need to wear the mask, because talking about wellness, health, and prevention does not have to undermine other things that can help slow the spread of the virus. You can talk about both. I believe it was Channel 6. They finally did a piece. I mean, I thought it was a bit late, but well, it was earlier this year, and I was like, oh, wow, that was awesome. I took a picture and I did a post about it. And they did mention, and even more so now, the modifiable risk factors are underlying health conditions. A modifiable risk factor, simply put, is a health behavior associated with a particular disease or risk. So what do we know? CDC statistics, I won't cite exact statistics. People can look that up themselves. But it is safe to say that a substantial amount of the mortality rates, as much as 3 underlying health conditions. And Nueces County, I think we used to be #1 in diabetes type 2 and obesity. I think the Valley, it might be McAllen, I might be wrong on that. They have #1 now, but we're up there, and we're up there for a long time. So diabetes type 2, which can happen late adult onset, being sedentary and obese, the body still makes insulin, but it becomes desensitized to that insulin, or it can't do its job to deal with the glucose in the blood, break it down, transport and metabolize it for energy. So what happens? High blood sugars, you can get diabetic retinopathy. You know how that goes. So this situation is then shown to be modifiable if you lose weight. The immediate benefit for anybody who's overweight with diabetes type 2, here's something that will start happening right away. The acute or the immediate adaptation the body does, or it responds, when you start breathing and exercising, it disturbs your metabolism and makes your body start becoming sensitive again to the insulin so it can do its job. I've had clients, we would check the blood sugar before they worked out, and afterwards it'd be lower. Obviously, the metabolism was getting revved up and disturbed. So that activity, that begins rather soon. You don't got to wait for that benefit. Losing the weight is a process over a period of time. So that's modifiable. I mentioned smoking cigarettes. So what does COVID-19 do? It can affect the lungs, right? So not to be mean or even judging anybody from a moral standpoint, but if you're wearing the mask and you're only standing 6 feet away, like I wrote up here, our health and wellness is more than just wearing a mask and standing 6 feet away. If that's our only intervention, I think we're missing the larger picture or the point. And I premise how I say that because I don't want people to take it the wrong way, because anxiety can get high right now because this has hit us out of nowhere, and a lot of people may not have been doing anything. So that gets them anxious, and that responsibility to do something is like, it feels like, oh my gosh, I don't want to hear that right now because I have these risk factors, and I get it and I respect that. But I would encourage people to, we can still get a plan now, because this could happen again in the future. So all of these, how we internalize stress, that is modifiable. That can affect you. I mentioned the lack of sleep. Malnutrition, it's not just the skinny children on TV in other countries. malnutrition, if you're overweight and obese, that's malnutrition. You're eating, it basically means bad nutrition. You're not eating properly, commensurate with the needs of your body just for energy and health. So these modifiable risk factors increase the mortality. So why has all this been going on? Part of it's because of anxiety. If something is distant, I might die when I'm 65 because of diabetes type 2, or maybe it might happen at 60, but I'm only 33. That's down the road, right? Or I smoke cigarettes. My Uncle Jimmy lived to be whatever, smoking. Well, you can still get COPD even if you live a long life, and then that quality of life, right? So it's distant, it's down the road. So it doesn't feel immediate or salient of an issue. So that anxiety doesn't have as powerful of effect, perhaps, to have motivated some people into action. But guess what? With this virus, we know that if you have the underlying health issues, you have a higher chance of mortality to die from it. Unfortunately, there have been people, the news reported it, people with diabetes type 2, overweight or obese, some people hypertension, other issues going on, which those situations through lifestyle changes, exercise, proper nutrition, taking better care of yourself could put you in a better situation where you have a better prognosis to where you would be able to could survive if you're healthier. Nothing's a guarantee in life, but it gives you a better prognosis. And I'd much rather have a fighting chance if anything's going to happen to me. So because this is here now and we can't get away from it, what else can you do? So I've seen individuals productively starting to use anxiety now because they feel more threatened that, hey, I might not, it's not me that I might die early when I'm 65. I could die now and I'm 30, right? 35, because I have diabetes type 2, I'm overweight, and I'm smoking a pack and a half of cigarettes every day, and I'm sedentary. Being sedentary by itself, by the way, that one variable by itself puts you at a high risk of early death. That's a fact. So, anyways.
No, those are massive conversations. There's so much to unpack from everything you said, because I think that there's a lot of great information there. One of the things I took a note about was that you talk specifically about what you can do right now. I think that that's a human condition in that, and you talked about the anxiety related to it. But what can I do right now? Well, I can go to the store and I can buy some things to clean my hands with. I can go to the store and I can buy a mask, and we're conditioned to buy. We can go buy a solution. But here is another option. Here are some other options. And I think some of the feedback that was initially given was, well, that's not going to make the change fast enough for that to happen. And I like that you actually talked about there are actually things that if you just get started today, some of that movement will actually shift your reality and how things are coming out,
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I think that that's really good. And I like, we haven't at all talked about in the last 4 episodes about the smoking part of it. And I think that that's probably a huge one for a lot of people. My very best friend, she says, don't tell me anything. I don't want to hear about it. And I'm like, okay, I love you for just the way you are. But she's made comments about having concerns about that. So my question would be, what were some of the things that you did? If someone had the thought, like, you know what, there's enough anxiety in my life related to this pandemic or the next pandemic or whatever that I've decided I want to try to quit smoking. What advice would you give somebody since you've been through that yourself?
Yes. So what I try to do with people is, first, I meet them where they're at and acceptance of them as a person. It's this, if you have a family member or somebody, it's that unconditional positive regard, that's counselor language, but anybody can use that, right? That genuine empathy or sympathy. So that's going to help them to not feel on guard versus just giving directives and facts. Because this is part of the question. Let's be honest, that lack of education alone is not a problem of changing behavior. It's about a willingness to commit to changing and living a new lifestyle, new behaviors, replacing the old way of thinking. And there's components to be said about addiction, dopamine, things like that. But you know what? Being aware of these things that are going on is part of education, but it doesn't mean we can't change just because it's challenging. So what I would do is encourage them, focus on any talk they might give you. If they just give you a little nugget of anything positive, latch onto that and go with that. So if motivational interviewing, I get a lot of resistance a lot of times. So you're focusing on any talk that they say that you could tether it to change, whether their anxiety is like, oh, this COVID-19 and I know I need to smoke, but I don't want to hear about it really. What that really is about is I don't want to feel anxious and I'm not ready to change, right? I'm not sure how to change. So what I use a lot, and a lot of counselors in the industry who work with changing behaviors, is that's I'm talking to that individual. I'd say, well, you know, I can appreciate that. Maybe you don't feel ready. Maybe the smoking, there's some of the things that you like about that it helps you feel relaxed or cope, and I get that. But based on everything we've talked about, and I heard earlier you said this pandemic issue made you think about it more. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 is like I am super motivated to change. It's going to happen today, right? And 1, you know, I'm not just ready to change yet. I'm just being honest. Where do you rate on that scale, right? And typically, if they're being honest and they're in that contemplation stage, they're kind of have ambiguity or ambiguous about changing, but they're thinking they should, but they're not quite ready. They might say, well, on a scale of 10, I'm at a 3 for changing. And not being judgmental, you can say, you know, I can appreciate that. So could you please maybe tell me why it's not a 0? Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, why is it not a 0? Because there's a reason it's not a 0. Most people have something that's of value to them that gives them some consideration. So our value system that I mentioned over here, you know, values, basically it's worth we assign to something. It's a quality of a thing or activity. So anything can have a way of viewing worth. So everybody has something that has meaning and value to them, right? So part of that emotional component, the cognitive component, the way we think about it isn't always enough, because we intellectually understand a lot of things and we can be aware of a lot of our behaviors, but that's not enough. We need to get an insight. Insight is when we now have become to where we don't behave in a certain way. The evidence for change in or insight is a change in behavior. So this individual, whatever values that she has that are very strong, perhaps it's grandchildren, a family, a goal, something that's unfulfilled, they don't want to do, things that are very salient with them. Try and work on attaching those things to some of her motivation to stop smoking, help it to be more meaningful. And then there's something to be said about a program. You know, if you need help to stop smoking cigarettes, cognitive behavioral therapy can help with that. Some people, they'll use medication assistance sometimes to stop smoking. That's a whole other side issue for some people, not everybody. But my situation, I'll be honest, it wasn't like I just, it did get to where, okay, I'm done and that was it. But the reason I was able to stop smoking cigarettes after 20 years is because of, my value system was shifting, and this shift in my practice and wellness, and people play games with themselves. I would get the pack of cigarettes and I would say, okay, there's a half a pack left, I'd throw them in the trash. That's it. So the next day I'd get off of work and I would rationalize, well, I already spent the money. Let me go ahead and, you know, get them out and smoke them, right? So then eventually got to where, oh yeah, I know what I'm going to do. So I poured water on them one time, threw them in the trash can, because I knew if I try to pull them out, they'd be wet. Can't smoke them. Well, me being clever, I was like, well, I'm just going to put them in the microwave and dry them off. And of course, they were horrible. And then I was like, man, what the hell am I doing? This is ridiculous, right? And that's kind of like the light bulb, flash of insight moment, introspection, looking at your behavior and being honest about it. And I said, this is ridiculous. I don't want anything to have that kind of power over me, right? So it was just one of those come to spirit moments with yourself, whatever your spirit is. Some people say come to Jesus moment, whatever. But I started thinking, I mean, do I really want something to have this kind of power over me? So it was that moment that my motivation became a 10, and everybody's different. There was a transition period of getting that out of my body, but I got through it in a week or so. But it was replacement behaviors, drinking more water, exercising more, replacing that behavior with a different activity. And that can be creative. So if I have an ashtray, it's going away. Maybe I'm going to have my coffee mug instead, where I used to have the ashtray, right? And you know what? There's something to be said for harm reduction. Coffee's not bad for you, right? They can talk about the caffeine part, but you're better off drinking a little coffee than you are smoking cigarettes every day, right? So for people in that situation, empathy, non-judgmental, meet them where they're at, support them where you can, and focus on their strengths, and anything that's positive, jump on that. Because guess what? They know, most people have heard the lectures, the stories about cigarettes. I say it a million times. It's the #1 most modifiable risk factor responsible for premature disease decline, COPD, osteosclerosis. Take a slew of this, how it messes you up, right? People heard that. If education was sufficient, the whole world would be fixed. We'd all be fixed. So we know it's more than that. It's that cluster I talked about, and as part of how we now look at wellness these days. So they need an approach that's beyond just the education part. And I'm not minimizing education. It's important. It's part of it. And for some people, that might be enough motivation for them if they become anxious enough. And for them, that is sufficient. They change behavior. For a lot of people, education is not enough. It's usually going to be some other things going on. That use of cigarettes or any other unhealthy behavior could be tied into getting their needs met that all human beings have. It might be love and belonging, mastery, survival, feeling free, stress, right? Mm-hmm. So we got to deal with those issues, and how do we learn healthier replacement behaviors or coping mechanisms, as they say in my field. So something different to replace the old behavior that was meeting other needs. So you got to have a plan, in other words. So if you can just throw the cigarette down, okay, that's it. Well, you got to work on changing everything associated with that, the behavior, the way you thought about it, how being honest. I would rather somebody be honest and say, you know what, I'm not going to rationalize smoking cigarettes. I admit that I know it's messing me up, but I just like it. I'm not ready to change. That is a lot better. You know why? Because if by doing that, they're not getting rid of anxiety because it's going to stay there. And the behavior doesn't match it's incongruent with the truth about the smoking. So eventually they're going to usually be motivated to do something about it. It's when you rationalize and distort the unhealthy behavior, you don't feel anxious no more. So you're less likely to be motivated to change the behavior. So anyways, that's a mouthful, I know.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And one of the things that I love about the way we're doing these Voices for Wellness, one of the things that I think is very important to me is that you talking to a group, me talking to a group, Tim talking to a group, all of us are going to resonate differently with different people and connect with different people in different ways. And so even just that conversation alone, just saying like, oh yeah, I've got somebody at home who's really close to being able to quit, and I just need to, pull from that. Or you've got somebody that is just like complete rationalization, like cannot hear you, won't hear you, and that's okay. And nothing you can do, there's not any horrible thing you can tell them about what's going to happen that's going to change what they hear until they're ready to hear it. And that doesn't matter whether it's talking about smoking or exercise or food or jobs or boyfriends that we shouldn't be, girlfriends we shouldn't be, whatever, it doesn't matter what it is, and so I that's been one of the things that's been most important to me about this Voices for Wellness is just a lot of us giving our thoughts, our opinions about wellness, our expertise about wellness, and hoping that there's somebody out there that will resonate with us, hear it, and make a shift that will make them feel better in life. And that's one thing that's really important to me about this.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more. You're absolutely right, because there's different voices for different people, and sometimes people are going to receive things differently or better depending on who they're getting that information from. And a lot of that, sometimes it might be a function of their past life experiences, their culture, or perhaps how they view your situation. Maybe they relate to it more, and so on. So I couldn't agree with you, 100% agree with that. That's absolutely true.
Yeah. Okay. Last question. Tell us that one thing that you cannot not tell us before we get done with this today, something someone has to hear from you.
Well, hopefully what I would encourage everybody is that, actually I put a little note here. So what is the one thing? So we talk about wellness, taking care of ourselves, and we look at society being healthier and better off. So sometimes sometimes it can be backwards. And here's why from this context. I would encourage people that by taking care of yourself, you be the change. So if you want your family to be healthier, you become healthier. You be the change first. The best thing we can do for society is to be the best version of ourselves. For me to be the healthiest, best version of James Hunter, you be the best, healthiest version of you, and so on. By doing that, I am more efficient. I'm more effective at being of service to other people in my job, better mood If I'm in a better mood, I behave nicer towards people. So the change comes from with us. Working on improving you improves the collective, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So if you want to change the collective, change yourself, be the change that you want society to be. If everybody made it a priority to take care of themselves, we all benefit and we all win together. But we're out of balance because unfortunately not everybody, and there's different reasons. And this is not a moral issue of good or bad person. This is an issue of hopefully people being inspired to consider what they value, that quality of life we talked about. So take care of yourself, be the best version of yourself, this health, the wellness we talk about. And by doing that, you are doing a service to society because the collective benefits when you are the best version of yourself. So, you know, we got to be that change first. And there's something to be said. Yes, I want to go out and help people. That's excellent. But you got to be able to be healthy yourself before you help other individuals and so on. I've worked with people in recovery, mental health, and they are like wanting to jump in there and start saving the world. I'm like, man, that's fantastic. You know, that's part of recovery is giving back. I said, but it's not being selfish to put yourself first, because you got to be good first before you're going to be any good to anybody else or be there for them, right? What good is it if you don't take care of yourself and you're not here no more, prematurely unnecessary, or you're not very efficient because you just don't feel good, you're unhealthy. Yeah. So simply put, there's a lot of things I could say, but I know this is getting a little bit 56 mess, but yes, that's it. I mean, start with yourself. You take care of you, we all benefit. And we're all awesome because of that.
Yep, I could not have said it better myself. And in fact, one of the first things I started saying at the very beginning of this entire pandemic situation, and it's a thing I say kind of all the time, but I was very adamant about saying it exactly this way. I cannot control the collective. I can only control myself. And if I focus on being the best version of me every single day, then everything will be better every single day. And so I that's a really good one to leave with, because I think that that's exactly the best thing anyone could say. I love it and I appreciate it very much.
Yes, ma'am, and I appreciate you.
Yes, I am so thankful to have your time today to share with us, to get to know you, because I've gotten to know you through this whole process, or peripherally gotten to know you through this whole process, and I appreciate that very much. And I want to thank you all for being here on the video with us. It's been a great time, and be sure to check out episodes 1 through 4, and then episode 6 is coming up, so stay tuned. But if you are interested in being one of our speakers that I interview, please reach out to me. Just send me an email, and you'll be able to find this right here on the YouTube channel. And thank you again, James, so much for your time. I appreciate you, and I hope you'll have a fantastic Tuesday evening.
Likewise. Thank you.
Bye. Bye, everyone.